Hi, we're back again with John Vaughn. We're continuing our conversations on Black Sky, White Sky, a Siberian tradition that came to us from Heidi Couch, and Heidi Abgey is her other name. And so, welcome, John. Nice to see you again, and thank you for agreeing to have this conversation with me. I really appreciate it. Um, Always, and you know, we've already had a little pre-recording conversation. Anytime I can grab you, I'm always happy. So,
Yeah,
thank you. Thank you.
yeah, sure.
So
Um,
we were just getting into some juicy stuff with our pre-recording. So do you want to just take off from where we were?
yeah. So, so we were talking about the elements and where the elements belong in the four, and I had gotten some from Heidi, and then I had kind of forgotten. I wasn't sure which element went where because it wasn't something we really majored on. Normally, when we were talking about the four, we were really talking about the master spirits, Volgan in the north, Umai in the east, Erlik in the south, and Tanger in the west. And so most of the time we were talking about those spirits and kind of what their maybe what their domain was a little bit, what kinds of things that they were known for in the tradition. For instance, Volgan is the guardian of our words. Words are super important in Black Sky and in Heidi's Black Sky. Words are very important, and so Logan was the guardian of our words. Um, Umai helps the young mothers. Erlich works with Grandfather Fire, and Tinger is the sort of um, let's call Tinger the progenitor of all the spirits and the sort of ginormous force of creation and destruction, something like that, probably. Um, and I would guess that Ulgan and Erlik probably come more from the Altai region. Tanger probably comes from the Turks and the Sky cult.
Oh, right.
Um,
Tengarism.
mhm, yeah. Um, I mean, all the spirits, Kaidi would call them the Tengari.
Right.
And then Umai uh, sleeps under the mountains of the Altai. So um, it could be the Altai region was really big for them, and then they
Mm-hmm.
have this kind of uh, Turkic influence that came in,
Right.
something like that, right? So those are the four, and so like I say, the I was never quite sure where the elements were, and I found a notebook of hers that actually her daughter Uta gave me to borrow for a while, and she had some stuff on there from the old tangerism.org um,
Mm-hmm.
website, and it talks about where the elements are and the directions. And she had it highlighted, and so I figured, okay, I was never totally sure where the elements should go, but when I read them, I thought this actually tracks pretty well with what I see when I'm in Journey, and so why not go with these? So, so the element for the north is water. The element for the east is air. Probably guess grandfather fire being in the south, got fire in the south, and uh, and then in the east we have earth,
Or in the West, you mean
and
Earth?
in the west we have earth.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah.
I had to write it down
Um,
too because I was trying to follow in my brain.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So, and then we were talking about gestures, and so I was sitting, and these gestures just kind of came pouring into my head. And so, why not share them? So, here's what came in for water:
Right.
the motion of water and waves. air could be something like this, the clouds. It could do something like that. Fire, and then earth could
Right.
just be like a hill or something like that.
Hmm.
The idea maybe isn't so much about the hand gestures, but it's about the energies and
Right.
however they work.
Recognizing those. Yeah,
Yeah, and
exactly.
so however they would work for someone else, that's perfectly fine.
Hmm.
I
What I
mean,
find interesting in the location of these elements is who plays off each other. You've got fire and water in opposition to each other, and air and earth in opposition to each other,
mm,
which to me, those are very powerful pairs of opposites.
mm,
Um, and there's just some incredible dynamics and tensions between them when you think about water and fire. They're almost the antithesis of each other. It's
yeah,
interesting. Yeah,
yeah.
and
Same with earth and air, right? You've got something that's very
earth and
soft,
air, when
very
yeah, earth
fun.
being just very grounded, air being, light and fluffy, out there, those kind of
Yeah,
opposites.
yeah, yeah.
Um, so
Mm,
that's really interesting. Yeah, in many other traditions, you find that, especially in magical traditions, there's often an addressing of each of the elements in particular forms around the directions to create particular tensions to help in the magical working.
mm,
And these are some of the interesting ones. And I think we've talked about this before, but in terms of the elements, even though we talk about air being in the east, each of the elements has all the elements in it in some way.
mhm.
So we're not looking
Right.
at a purity of air,
Yeah. Right.
right? So, I mean, because as air moves like this, if you just think of it in physical geography terms, I guess it's physical geography, that's where I would have studied it. This is the water cycle moving the air
Mm,
because of evaporation. So you've got water going on here. And of course, you need fire to heat the water to get the air to move, and then the dust particles of earth to make it fall as rain. So you've got everything going on in each of
mm.
these kinds of things if you just
Yeah.
think about weather and the water cycle.
Yeah. 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 Absolutely.
So,
Yeah. I learned recently, I don't know how I got this old without knowing this, but apparently, when water evaporates, something that evaporates with it is frog eggs.
yeah.
And
Hmm.
they can try and fish, maybe fish eggs too, because they seem to just you have a body of water and fish will just appear there. Like that's that, I think.
Right. I had a friend tell me that once that said, well, so how did you get fish in your pond that you just made? She said, they come from the air. And this was 40 years ago, and I'm like, right. But perhaps that is something. That is something. And even if a duck lands in the water, who knows
Yeah,
what's on the duck's feet?
yeah,
And the ducks come from the air when they fly. I mean,
right, right.
kind of crazy stuff, but when you
Yeah.
start talking shaman stuff, there are metaphors for things, and there are things that you can observe from the real world, ordinary reality. But there's this kind of blending and crossover
Hmm.
that can inform us,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I mean, if you have a lightning storm, you've got all four, right? You've got, just as you were saying, you've got fire and the lightning, you've got um, the earth creating that grounding force where the lightning strikes.
Hmm.
You've got the air, of course, you've got the water. So, yeah, for sure. Um, Maybe the idea about having them in different places is like creating balance.
Which is so interesting because we talked about this maybe in a couple of conversations earlier. The idea that that's what the shaman's job is to do, is to create balance, to be that balancing agent.
Yeah. Yeah, I did a ceremony for somebody very recently, and they had me hand her something representing the sun in one hand and something representing the moon in the other.
Hmm.
So I thought that was pretty interesting. There's so many, pretty much every ceremony there's something new that happens you've never seen before.
Right. Yeah, it is interesting. It is interesting. Now, was that an in-person healing ceremony?
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, I can show you that. They sit on a little table. Um, so sun and moon.
Oh, beautiful.
I just had her hold them. You know.
And it's interesting because then you've just demonstrated with the objects that there is a kind of the metaphor at play because that's not the sun and that's not the moon, but as metaphor and symbol, they carry the power of sun and moon. So, and when the spirits work with you in that way, they're imbuing those objects, right? Would you say that? How would you language that?
I don't know. Yes, probably. I just sometimes I'm taking orders and you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
okay, that's what you guys want, you know?
Hmm.
Um, but I think I think that there is, I mean, when you're working with spirits, they've got their own stuff they're doing. It's like you're in a room
Hmm.
and there's maybe a bunch of other people with you that might be one of them might be an evil person, another might be a shaman from times past, and another might be someone else, and someone else might be in a form of a frog or a rabbit or who knows what, anything. And so it's all very, you just gotta flow with it.
Yeah, and fluid. It's very fluid.
Yeah,
It's so
super
interesting. I
fluid.
was reading a book this morning that was talking about this idea of multiple universes and how in the altered state, what we're really doing is creating portals to these other universes. And this gets me to the question that I'd proposed that we talked about today is this idea of the skies.
Oh yeah.
Because the shaman, in very traditional, very kind of according to the book by the model, deals in three different realms. We've got the lower world, the middle world, and the upper world. These are the cosmic realms that kind of play across a lot of Asia, Central Asia in particular, in terms of motif, if you want to get all scienced out about it. But when we actually do our work, we do seem to enter other realms. And according to the sky, black sky, white sky, there are nine realms. Yes, the skies. How would you relate those? Can you relate those to the world tree or rungs on a ladder? What would you say? It's just something I've always been wanting to ask you if Heidi ever talked about the skies in relationship to the world tree.
Yeah, yeah, it's totally so. Um,
I hope it doesn't feel too much like a pop test, a pop
no, that's
quiz.
okay. No, you're right on. I mean, so here's a totally that she made. I think, do you
I
have a version of this
I
that
do. I
you
have it
got?
with a yellow chaduk.
Okay, yeah. So, but the world tree is right here, you know,
Absolutely. Yeah.
and I probably on this podcast we haven't really talked about the origin of that story, but she was making she had her grandchildren over and they had been playing with clay.
Hmm.
And when everybody left, she was sitting there and she went into trance and created a Toli. And when she came out of it, she had a Toli and she was quite surprised. And she had to talk with Spirit about it. And she was like, well, if there aren't nine generations of whitesmiths in your family who made these, you're not supposed to make them. I don't know where that rule came from, but it was something that she'd been told when she was a girl. And they told her, well, it didn't have to be contiguous,
Right, right.
you know. And she was the inheritor of a tradition that probably goes back thousands of years, maybe 10,000 years, maybe longer. Who knows? Um, she herself probably didn't really know, but there are caves with the paintings in them in Siberia, apparently, that are, I think she said they were 200,000 years old. And some of the beings painted in the caves were the same ones that they're still working with,
Hmm.
believe. I think that's what she said. So who knows how old these things are, but
Well, in that span of time, there had to be nine smiths, nine
it had
white
to be Nine
smiths.
Smith. That's right. Thank you for reminding me what the heck I was talking about. So yeah, so anyway, so she got that from them, and then she said, okay, so she went down to a foundry, I guess, right? That would be a foundry, the place where the guy works for the forge and pours the metal.
Hmm.
And so she had this cast made, and then she created the Toli, and it's got little symbols in there. Like, let's see if we can see one. I don't know if it's gonna show up. Oh yeah, there's a
Yes, you
vase
can see
there,
it. You can
right?
see
And
the
there's like
vase.
tears going in. So this is
Hmm.
she had a big connection to Kuan Yin,
Right.
and the stories around Kuan Yin and all the tears that she shed for people who were suffering.
Well, and the compassionate quality, I think, of Kuan Yin would have been very important because that's the impetus is the compassion of the shaman,
Yeah,
right? To do the work for community.
yeah, 100%, right. And there's also a balancing thing with Kuan Yin where at first she showed up, I think, as a man, and then realized that the women were really suffering and came back as a woman. And so
Mm-hmm.
when you see the statues of Kuan Yin, there's this kind of um, not super feminine, but not super masculine
Right, that
face. It's kind of,
androgynous kind of appearance.
yeah, androgynous. So um, she used to talk about that a lot. That all those things were important to her. Let's see, there's another one here. You can see the hand with the spiral in it.
Exactly, right.
Yeah, and she said that was the ancient symbol of the shaman,
Mm-hmm.
just the power in the hand. And then let's see, what's this one?
That's the lizard
Yeah, so there's
under
like,
the
yeah, so I was
roots.
never sure if this was, she's big into dragons. So I was like, is that a dragon? Is that a snake? What is that?
Well, and I can
Not sure.
almost see breath curling out of it, which might be a
It
flying
could be,
dragon,
yeah,
fire-breathing dragon.
it could be. Let's see, what else do I have here? Let's see if I do it. Okay, lag on my phone here. So
That's okay. I'm going to ask you a question while you're having a brief look.
yeah,
Just because many of our listeners may not actually know, you and I are talking Toli. What is a Toli?
yeah. So a Toli is a magic mirror, essentially.
And I've heard
And
people call it the Swiss Army knife of the shaman because it can
really,
do so many different things.
hmm. Um, yeah, I'm just trying to turn my flashlight off. Yeah, I couldn't remember if there was another symbol. They're very anyways, but you'll see these, like, you can get them on eBay for like $30 from China, and they have all kinds of different things on them.
Right.
Oh,
So there's one side that tends to be convex, which is very shiny. That's the very shiny side. And the other one is concave, and that's the back. And the little knob that's in the center is typically where the piece of fabric or ribbon is passed through, called a khadag.
yeah,
And based on the color might explain a bit about the use of the toli. For example, a red one might mean that it's for very dire circumstances. Yellow might be for teaching. White is for gift of spirit. Just those kind of colors. You probably are more aware of them than I, because I think you probably use them more frequently than I.
yeah. So right, so some of my toys don't have cadets on them yet.
Hmm.
Uh, there's a whole thing around Tolis. Um, And the reason they don't have cadets is because I need to get some fabric
Right. But what's
to come
interesting
through
is the
together.
color of those scarves or ribbons that go through them often are the same colors as the skies. So there's a kind of continuity in thought and thinking and metaphor, thought and thinking, same thing, duh, when it comes to the use of color in the tradition, would you say?
Hmm. Yeah,
So if we were going to bounce back to the skies, and because you just showed us that beautiful toli that has the world tree
the
on the
world tree.
back,
Yeah.
where are the roots and where's the crown? And how are the colors located in between?
Oh man. So I think the white is near to the earth.
That's what I'd remembered as well. The roots were the white and the black was the crown.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like black sky.
It's a little tricky, yeah, because the model is, so if you think about a 3D model in your head, which I guess shamans have had in their heads for a long time, um, well, way before the advent of computers,
Right.
um, probably, not just shamans, I'm sure, but it's a thing for us. So, right. So, um, you could think of the world tree, maybe it's like a column of energy.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that column of energy is something like a hologram. It's kind of everywhere, but you could kind of, or maybe in a quantum sense, you could focus on one particular area and find it. But um, so yeah, so you've got white. So what Heidi said about the white sky shamans is that they needed to stay close to the roots of the world tree because that's where their power was. That's where the white sky things were. And then when you go up, the colors kind of separate. And so you've got, um, so the colors of nine sky are like primary colors, and then you get into metallic colors, and then there's the black color,
Mm-hmm.
which is kind of an absence of color. The white, I guess, is all the colors, and then at least in the spectrum
Excuse
of
me.
light, right? I think in physical things maybe it's the opposite, but with light, it's white is all the colors, and then
Right.
in the skies you've got yellow, red, green, blue, and then you've got the metallic, copper, silver, gold, and then you've got black. Uh, but the interesting thing about in this Siberian shaman and or at least the way that Heidi taught it was that the core of the world tree for them is black sky. And so black sky is all the way up through and up into that final crown at the top where the black sky.
So you would almost say that in the center, if you were drawing it, it would almost be like a straw of black in the middle of the column.
Mhm.
So the core is there. Okay.
Yeah.
So again, it almost sounds like when we talk directions, that even when we're moving into, say, green sky, I don't know where it would be on the world tree, there's still a core element of black in it.
Yeah.
Just like not all the colors are or directions are pure.
Yeah. So right. So I think with the discussion about the elements, if you were to combine north and south, or if you were to combine east and west, you have these complementary opposites, I guess you could call them.
Hmm.
And so the colors, you can do similar things. And of course, I say you can do similar things, but when we're in journey, it's really the spirits who are helping us see what needs to happen,
Hmm.
you know.
It's
But
it's interesting. I'm glad you mentioned that because anybody listening to that, you talked a little bit earlier about having all these other beings or people in the room telling you what to do. These aren't just any old spirit. These are spirits with whom you have a relationship, a working relationship. You've built a relationship with them over time, so you trust them implicitly in their guidance and what they're suggesting that you do to help somebody. I
yeah,
just wanted to be real clear about that. So it's not like just any Joe Blow spirit comes through the room and says, "Hey, John, I'd like you to do this to that person." No, it's they're driving the bus, these other beings, but you know who they are. pretty much.
So there is a lot of mystery there for me.
Hmm.
I don't know how to describe the people. I think when I first started out, I was working with a few power animals that I received in the basic workshop that you guys did.
Okay,
That was my
we're from core shamanism, from the core
yeah,
shamanic model. Yeah,
that
so
was
it
how I
was
started was with that. And
right.
so I had, you know, a set number there were
Hmm.
two of them. And those are the spirits that I worked with.
Hmm.
And then when I started working with Heidi, a lot of other spirits came in to the mix. And now what I have is more of this sense of, we talked about Buddha before, the ancestor spirit.
Right.
How many spirits are there?
That's the mystery, isn't it? In
Right?
the tradition.
Millions,
Yeah.
bazillions. Um, if you go into, I think you had mentioned in a conversation that when you go into the north, you might go into the north, and then the north becomes a launching pad to go somewhere else,
Hmm.
right? So
Right.
when you go somewhere else, where are you working with there?
Right. It's realm upon realm upon realm. Um, yeah.
Yeah.
So some of these
So
very traditional places, to me, when we go to the north, almost seem like gateways to others.
so let's say we are working with a tradition that's 10,000 years old. Um, how many generations is that?
Hmm. Right.
Few hundred, maybe 1,000. I don't know. I'm not sure how many generations are in. Let's if we call a generation 40 years, 40 into 10,000.
You'll have to do the math because that's not something that's my strong suit.
Yeah, so let me just pull up the calculator. So I got
Yeah.
1,000 divided by 40, 250. Okay, yeah, that's not that many generations, right?
No, but that's plenty when you think about 250 generations. But at each generation, when you go up, if you talk about ancestors, I go up and I have four grandparents. I continue, I have eight great grandparents. I have 16 great great grandparents. And it becomes exponential as you go up in this huge
Yeah.
upward extension. So by the time you get to 250 generations back, you've got this incredible spread of
Right,
ancestors or
right.
people you could consider ancestors.
Yeah. So I don't know how all that works, um but there's potentially a lot of people, and I've had shamans step out of Buddha, let's just call
Hmm.
it that, let's say it that way. And I would tell Heidi, oh, there's someone here and they look like this. And she would just nod her head, and um, all sorts of spirits can come through. But
Hmm.
I guess what I trust in is the tradition.
Right, right.
You know, I trust that there's something there, and that's actually kind of what I want to get into with the directions, because so I'll just be super honest here. I'm kind of in a period right now where I'm not doing whole lot of work in the community. I'm really more focusing on myself, and so that I can be a better dad and be a better husband and things like that. So I've really been working on
Hmm.
myself, and I'm doing therapy, and I'm doing some energy healing work that's very new, kind of somewhat new to me. Um, and I'm doing ceremony kind of all at the same time,
Right, right.
hitting it from various angles. Um, and so I've been on my own a lot lately. I haven't been meeting with other people. I've just been focusing on myself.
Hmm.
So, um, so one of the results of that is I've spent a lot more time slowing down and listening, and that's so important. I'm learning more and more how important that is to just slow down and not be in a hurry.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
I'm not in rush hour traffic. I'm in ceremony.
Hmm.
And so I just really need to remember that and just stay slow. Um, the Navy SEALs have a saying about that. Is it slow is smooth, smooth is fast? That's what they say. And so to be the most effective at anything I'm doing, I need to slow down and make sure I'm doing it right,
Hmm.
you know. And so I think there's just was so much hurrying. It's almost like my heart was caffeinated. You know what I
It's,
mean?
isn't it so interesting because I've been getting the same message lately too.
Mm,
Listen, feel, observe.
yeah,
Those three words, and it is definitely what you're saying. Slow down, and I appreciate that metaphor. The heart gets caffeinated, which, and when you think about what
right,
caffeine does to your muscles, it tightens it up. You become hard, right? And so if you're decaffeinating your heart, you're softening and opening, which is beautiful. What a nice thing. Thank you for that. That's really
right.
cool.
I just made it up right then,
Yeah,
but
but spirit informs us, right?
yeah. So yeah, so the thing is, in slowing down, I think I've realized that um, directions have become painful for me, and I think the reason they've become painful is that I wasn't connecting to spirit deeply enough,
Hmm.
and there was a kind of sense of after doing it for however many years, a bit of rote, where
Exactly. I hear you. Mm-hmm.
yeah, and so it had become a chore that I
Mm.
had to do before I did ceremony, and it still is. It's that moment where you stop and you give respect to the spirits is so important. And so
It's the
I had,
inhale and the exhale that cleans us out so that we
yeah,
can
yeah,
do what we need to do, right?
right, yes, yes, so much. Um, but so I started to realize that they were painful, and so I sat with my spirits and um, had got direction coming through, and they told me, okay, here's what you're gonna do. You're gonna okay, dog.
All is well.
You wanna go see Rowan? You wanna see Rowan, buddy? Yeah, you wanna go see Rowan? Oh, my puppy dog.
That's all good.
Yeah, there he
There he
goes.
goes.
My daughter just came home.
I saw her. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's all good.
that's our little buddy right there.
Yeah. My
Yeah.
little buddy's around here somewhere too. I think maybe he went upstairs to watch the baseball or the golf with Papa. But so
So,
so I love that you brought this up because I think this is something that happens as people work within traditions over periods of time that it becomes a challenge to keep it fresh, to keep it at that level of exploring and expanding. Because, like you say, okay, I'm going to do ceremony. This is what I have to do. And then it's like, I want to just get on with this piece and then get to what I want to, the ceremony,
yeah.
as opposed to like, this is a beautiful piece. I just want to stay in this piece as almost as well. And it's hard to keep that fresh,
Mhm.
hard to keep that
Yeah.
actively engaging. So I can understand that. I think that's part of our earlier conversation in
Yeah.
approaching something that is a ritual, but wanting to make it more meaningful in a different way. So I'm glad you said that. Thank you. I think people listening need to hear that that can happen to anybody, that it does.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I'm just yeah. Yeah. Sometimes I think some people sometimes look at me like I have all the answers, but I really don't. I'm just a person like everybody else trying to figure it out.
And I think it is fascinating because Dana in class will often tell the story of Grandfather Duvan, who was an Ulchi shaman who came to the United States and taught some of his tradition. When he did ceremony for a group of people, he was speaking in Olchi. It had to be translated into Russian, which was then translated into English. But the essence of what he was saying after 75 years of practicing as a shaman within his village was, I'm just a man. I'm just a guy here asking you all for help. And it didn't come from a place of false humility. It came from a place of truly comprehending that we are just people trying to figure this out. And as much as I poke and prod you for answers to questions about black sky, white sky, I do understand that we're all trying to take the teachings that Heidi shared with us and put them into some format that makes sense for us that we can work with and grow with. Would you say that's accurate?
Yeah, yeah, 100%. I mean, she she probably said it every week, make it your own.
Mm-hmm.
Take what is given and make it your own.
Mm-hmm.
So so right now I'm working on that. That's really what I'm working on, making,
Right. Mm-hmm.
and
So can I ask you a question as you're making it your own? We as a group had done a number of journeys to the various skies. We went to red, yellow, blue,
mhm,
green.
mhm.
I remember some of the metallic copper and silver skies, finding qualities in those places.
Yeah,
Um, and have you used what you learned in those journeys in any particular way?
yeah.
Is it something you can mention? I mean, I can mention one thing for me that was important.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay, go ahead.
I'll just say it very quickly. I had the sense at one time that my father, who has passed away, was not happy where he was in the other worlds.
Mm,
And totally at the direction of my helping spirits, I went to find him and collected him and said, okay, I know you're not happy. Let's see what we can do. And at the guidance of the helping spirits, took him to a place in green sky.
mm,
He just wanted to go to green sky. And for me, the place in green sky was by the water. He wanted to go on a boat and he wanted to just sail out on the water. And so that's where I left him in green sky, and he seemed completely at ease with that.
mm,
And then I returned from my journey work. But had I not known about green sky, I may not have understood exactly where my helping spirits were taking me and my father's spirit. So
wow.
those particular journeys were very helpful to me to understand that there were these places, other realms that were available.
Mhm. Yeah. So so I know we really want to talk about the skies. I
I
wanted
keep going
to
there, but if there's something else
I
you want to
know.
say, go for it.
I know, yeah. I really want to finish my thought about the directions.
Please do.
I wanted to just tell you what happened. So there's this word in the tradition that is called calm, Khan. And what Heidi said what calm means is is you are on the journey to merge with spirit, right? So there's a calm of nine shamans, or which is a plural use, and then there's a calm, which is the single shaman. And she would use that term to describe people who were doing shamanic work in the community. She would call them calm, or she would call them, you know, shamans maybe, or whatever. But that word came up a lot. So when I got the direction about how to fix directions for me, the first thing I was told, I'm trying to remember what order it was in. Basically what they showed me were like layers, like concentric rings. So the concentric ring on the outside was, hey, the spirits are way over there, and I'm seeing them, and I am sending them offerings, and I'm thanking them for being around and being available to me as a shaman. So, like if I go into the north, I might see. Um, lately, I've been seeing a what do they call them? They're the Mongolian version of the prairie dog, marmot. Is that the
Oh,
right word?
marmot, yeah.
Yeah, I've been seeing a marmot, and he's become a power animal for me now. He's around a lot.
Hmm.
Um, and he seems to be related to White Sky, I think. Um,
Which is interesting because a marmot is actually probably more like a groundhog, we would think. And they burrow. And so they're
hmm,
very close to the earth, which is very much consistent with white sky.
yeah, it's true. So yeah, so the marmot has been around in the north, but I might see, polar bear's another big one,
Hmm.
um, in the north, and then I might go in the east, and I'll typically see fish. I see bear a lot of times in the east. Otters, I see otters in the east, and then I'll go around into the south, and I'll see volcanoes and um, things from the past. Uh, mammoth, mammoth might show up in the south.
Hmm.
Um, around in the west, I feel like I don't know, like everybody's there. All the ancestors are there, and I'll see spirits in the grass. I always see grass in the west and a big sky.
Mm.
Heidi would say if you see the sun and the moon in the sky at the same time, you're seeing the eyes of Tinger,
Hmm. Yeah.
right? So
Yeah. I remember that. Yeah.
yeah, so those are some of the spirits that I might see in the directions way out. And then the next time they gave me direction on, okay, now you're gonna bring those spirits into your energy field, bring them closer. And so I said, okay, so I invited them into my energy field. And I was like, wow, I'm feeling this, some of the pain is starting to dissipate now as this is happening. And then the next time I did directions, I was told, bring them all the way into your body. Like, okay, into my body, into my blood, into my bones, into my body, in my energy field, in my chakras, coming through all the way into my body. And I don't know, there's a place that's deeper than that. I think probably so, but we'll leave that one to the mystery.
Right. Yeah. Right.
And so now I'm getting an understanding of what calm means, merging with spirit,
Wow.
right? It's really revolutionized my practice, and at least in the way that I feel about it.
Hmm.
And I feel just a lot more connected. So I wanted to get that across because I feel like that's really important.
I'm so glad you did. I'm so glad you said what you needed to say and got me out of your way. Thank you. So yeah, because I think that's really interesting and important. The the idea of drawing in because the shaman merges and becomes um, there's that cooperation because I think the shaman becomes like more than one being with that.
For sure, yeah.
Interesting,
Can
yeah.
be a
And
lot of merging with spirits.
yeah,
Yeah.
so it reminds me of this idea of our beingness. We are really multiple beings. When we think about Uda as a multiple being, we as humans are multiple beings in many ways. If even if we just think about our own personal ancestry and the voices in our blood from our ancestors, but then when we begin to work with helping spirits and have them come in and help us, we do become there's this multiplicity that takes us out of this kind of flat world, this two-dimensional, into a multi-dimensional reality, which is just very interesting to me that that's come up in our conversation.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. That's I think of that as the shamanic ontology. What does it mean to be a shaman?
Yeah,
You know? And to me, it's really just about becoming more human. Like, I think, we've got houses and air conditioning and paved roads and so many things that kind of separate us from nature. And they give us a convenient way to experience life. But I noticed when I started doing ceremony, I started doing directions, I started feeling a lot more connected to the natural world, even though I'm not really a person who spends a lot of time in the woods or,
Hmm.
there are lots of people that are way more connected physically to the land, hunters or explorers, different people, spelunkers, divers, all sorts of people who,
Gardeners. I mean,
gardeners.
the landscape guys that do the lawns and all that. They're out there doing it. They're
Yeah,
in it.
exactly, exactly. There's so many people that are connected to the land in a way that I'm not. I mean, I'm a programmer. I sit in front of a computer all day,
Right.
and but when I started doing ceremony, I started to feel a lot more connected to the land
Hmm.
around me, and it's kind of inevitable.
Right. So, and you're bringing up another thought as we're having this conversation that our architectural space tends to limit our thinking about ourselves because we tend to be in these boxes, this, architecture. It's a way of binding us into directions, where you go, where you don't go. But as you do directions, the idea of directions being so far out into almost infinitely outward from where we are, that does unbind us. That takes us out of the strict structure of architectural space
Hmm.
to into perceptual space where we begin to have feelings and sensations and emotions.
Yeah, yeah. There's a concept in programming where so it's called compositional polymorphism. Polymorphism means you can have an object that becomes uh, other objects through um, either inheritance or through composition. And so with inheritance, you might have a class that is derived from another class. It extends a class, let's say, or implements a class.
Hmm.
And so you get the powers of the parent class and the child class through the inheritance. But you can also do compositional polymorphism, which is where you just create a property in the class that is a property of another class. And so now you've got let's say that your parent class is animal and your child class is dog, and then you pull in a property of um, normally probably in programming it would be something dog like, but in shaman world maybe you pull in the property of a cat or an owl, and so now you've got a dog who's had owl powers and cat powers along with his doggy things that he does, right?
Well, and that's like the human who shapeshifts or merges with the wolf
Yeah,
or the
yeah,
owl
exactly.
or the eagle. And that's fascinating.
Yeah.
That's really fascinating that and maybe when you talk about programming, the language of programming can help us understand what's happening
Mhm.
shamanically
Yeah,
and accept it shamanically. Because
right.
if we can accept it in programming, why can't it shift and be accepted in shamanic worlds?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like if you go into your browser and you right click on anything and you do inspect, it'll bring up, at least in Chrome or Firefox, it's I think Firebug, or maybe they've got their own inspector thing now. I think they have actually for some years, but I mean, usually in Chrome is where I'm usually debugging because it's what everybody uses now. So if you're in Chrome and you inspect something, you can find objects that are outside of the object that you're in, and you can drill down into that object and find objects that are outside of the object that you're now in. And you can go down into that object and find objects that are now outside of that. You find the parent, and you find the parent, you find the parent, and you find it. parent. It's infinite. You can keep going down and down
Wow.
into this object model. And when I think about that in terms of in shamanic terms, I think about that it's kind of the same. There's an infinity mirror in there.
That's like Uda. And
Yeah,
that whole idea of ancestry going,
it's enormously complicated, you know?
yes. Yes, and which
And
is mystery, right?
yeah, yeah, exactly. Maybe that's why if I go farther in than my body, maybe it feels like an infinity mirror or something.
Mm-hmm.
But it's so what are we? There's this have you heard this concept of the default mode network in the brain? We talk about that at all
I
or
don't think we've talked about that.
so this is a scientific thing. So you can turn the default mode network off by ingesting hallucinogens or by doing a whole lot of meditation until you finally have your aha moment and you're like, oh, I'm not suffering anymore.
Mm-hmm.
The default mode network is where this concept of I am is located. I'm a person, and it's made even worse by our particular language, I guess, by the Romance languages, where we have this concept of to be. I
Ah,
am, you are, I be, I'm being, I'm a being, I'm a location in time and space. I'm a person who doesn't want to feel pain. I'm a person who went through a lot of crap and now they can't sort through life. All that kind of stuff is there in default mode network. And if you
so
can
it's
turn
an
that,
identification, is what you're saying, an identification of be.
yeah,
I be this, I be that.
right, right. So when the Tibetan monks are doing their thing, they turn off default mode network and they enter into joy. You know, so
Yeah.
it's interesting. So then when the shamans are thinking about what um what am I? There's so many different things that are coming into that.
Mm-hmm.
And this notion of, well, I am this, I am that. I'm the senior developer on the team, or I'm the project manager, or I'm the gas station attendant, or I'm the gardener, and the whatever. You kind of see that, okay, that's a thing. It's a role. It exists. That's fine. But um, if we let those things define us too much, then we're in a trap,
Right.
and suffering
Right.
arises out of that, right?
Mm-hmm. Because we're that's the attachment, the Buddha's
Yeah.
attachment.
Yeah, yeah. The whole thing about attachment and avoidance, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Right.
so you're avoiding it or you're attaching to it because you're stuck on self. And it's natural to do that. That's what our brains do.
Mm-hmm.
But there is a way to not do it.
And so can drumming takes us out of that, doesn't it? As
Yeah, it
we
takes us
as
into
we
the
drum,
same
we
state,
shift.
theta state or whatever it is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And so yeah, some people are plant shamans, right? They get there with whatever plant they're using or in partnership with, hopefully.
Right.
And some shamans play drums, and that works really well too. And and then you know, there's this meditation thing you can do.
Well, yeah, right. When we talk about shifting states, I mean, there are 8 ways to do that. You either do it in an exhibitory way or an inhibitory way. So you can use breath to slow down, you can meditate to slow down, listen to music to slow down, or
Okay.
you can beat drums, you can dance, you can sing, you can chant. I mean, even pain and sex are pathways of exhibitorially changing your state of consciousness
Mm.
when used in the manner that are appropriate to those pathways. So yeah, so just shifting like that. Yeah, and
Right,
of course substances. That's definitely another one, depending on the substance. Yeah,
right,
so
right.
plant spirit medicine absolutely is part of that, or can
Mhm.
be.
Yeah, yeah, for sure it is. So yeah, so shamanic ontology, like what are we? I started asking that question when I was in the seventh grade. I was in this religion class and they had this book and and there was this question in there about, who am I?
Right.
And to me, I just thought, well, I kind of know who I am. What I'm more interested in is what am I? You know?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And here I am, 40 years later or whatever, playing drums and you know, experiencing various versions of of what it is to be human, essentially.
Right. And I think we're much more fluid and much more, we're so much more than what we think we are.
Yeah,
And when
yeah,
we step into that, we can be of greater service to other people. And I think we can make changes in the world that can really bring about the space for other people to step into that place as well.
yeah. So, so the whole thing with skies. Let's just talk about that for a minute. So,
Okay.
because I
And
want to
because
get
I
to
don't
your
want to
question about that.
take too much of your time, but whatever you want to say, we'll just go for it.
Yeah. So I'll just say a couple things,
Okay.
and then we'll quit because they're pinging me about dinner. I gotta go eat dinner. Um,
You're allowed
but
to eat.
yeah, eating's a thing. Um, so one of my earliest uh experiences of the skies was probably not skies per se, but it was this color
Hmm.
healing that I know you're familiar with. And I just want to talk about frequency, right?
Right.
Like different colors are different frequencies, and we find different energies in different frequencies, and we find different energies in different colors. The skies you could think of as worlds that you can travel to, as you mentioned with the journey you did for your dad.
Right.
But you can also just journey to a color, and so, but the healing ceremony that we did was something that Heidi said had been around for a long time, and the idea was that you could send colors, and some of them were colors that were known to be intrinsic within bodies, and then some of them were colors that were known to be you can go outside to find these and bring them in.
Right. Right.
So I think and then the different colors were different for different things, they're very specific. But what I found out when I started doing it more on my own, kind of, is that they would bring me all sorts of different colors that were needed in the moment.
Hmm.
And so then you get into this thing where it's this enormous complexity. It's like you're going from the guy in the lab who's trying to tease out what exactly is in this molecule in this plant that helps people solve cancer, right? And they're trying to zero in on just the particular thing in the molecule, and of course they're trying to copyright it, right? They're trying to do
Oh,
something,
right. Exactly. Because
but
that's where the money is.
yeah, but still they're coming in and they're trying to find this. To me, that's like a frequency, right? But when you get into it with spirit, there's all these different frequencies that interact with each other,
Hmm.
and there's no way to control it, right? It's like you can't really replicate. Maybe you could when there's no money in it, but you can't. How are you going to replicate like what's in tobacco? Well, why do it? You've already got tobacco. Or if you're going to try and replicate what's in ayahuasca brew, well, why do it? You've already got ayahuasca. It grows all
Right.
up, Banisterius. What is it? Banisterius.
Banisteriopsis capi.
Yeah, yeah. How do you say it? Yeah, that stuff grows all over the place now. It's grown in Hawaii. It's grown in the United States. Grown everywhere. It does really well wherever it's warm, I guess. And this is probably the same thing with the chacruna bush.
But what's interesting is you're mentioning frequency. So if we're talking about color, it's a frequency of light. If we talk about frequency of the molecule, that's another kind of frequency. Sound is a frequency. So algish, song, becomes that. So, I mean, you could
Yeah,
sing me yellow.
I could. Yeah, I
Right.
probably could sing a yellow. I wouldn't know why I was singing a yellow, but I could tune in and say, I'd really like to sing yellow. And
And
something would come through. And
it's
then,
interesting because in one healing session, I was actually instructed to follow those colors on the chart from Heidi
hmm,
and to sing Algish for each one of them. for a person we were working on. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I have to come up with like nine different, I don't even know how many colors there were on there, songs.
Right.
And it's just like, okay, fine. You're running the show. And then the drumming changed, the song changed, and even the length of time for the song was different. Some
Mm.
songs were longer, others were shorter.
Yeah.
But it's that whole
Right.
frequency thing that's fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah. That's it. I mean, it's like Martin Prechtel. He said there's this incredible intelligence that lives in the bush.
Mm-hmm.
We think we know what intelligence is, but we really don't. We've got this little piece of it here
Right.
that helps us navigate our life and helps us achieve things and procreate and just all the things that we need to do to keep the species going and to help each other and things and you know protect ourselves and all sorts of different things that happen. But when you get into the intelligences that's in nature, um, it's enormous. It's enormous. It's like the whole universe, and then the
Exactly.
universe is beyond
Mm-hmm.
can inform us. And just as we're just regular people, so we really the sense of just being a conduit for what needs to come through increases the deeper you get into all these things.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're not smart enough. I'm not smart enough to do what happens in ceremony. I'm just not. There's no
Right,
way.
right. Yeah, exactly. And it's trusting the helping spirits
Yeah.
to drive the
So
bus.
maybe that's enough for this time on skies and colors and frequencies and Algish.
I think that's
And
great. And we'll just stop right here so you can get on to your dinner and I can start working with that here in this household.
yeah,
Thank you so much for
yeah, of
spending this
course.
time. And I look forward to the next time we can talk.
Yeah, me too. Thank you so much for these conversations, Shane. It's a lot of fun. Thank you.
Yeah, it is it's cool. So
Yeah,
thank you.
sure.
See you, John.
See you.